Welcome to SDSF Live. Please let us know where you're logging on from. I'm Nicole Chen from Houston, Texas. SDSF Live is brought to you from the Schwachman-Diamond Syndrome Foundation, providing support to families around the world. I'm Michelle. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. And we went to the beach today. I still have sand in my hair. My kids found a bunch of rocks and beach glass, and it was super fun. I am
That was fun.
wicked happy to be with everyone here, though, and I'm excited to see. So this is the second of our back to school series, where we have brought on different tools and resources for you guys for going back to the school year, feeling prepared and 100% ready.
Right.
So tonight, our guest is Maura Ryan Donahue. Maura is a mom to 3 kids. Sorry. Aisling, Ruari, and Seán. And Aisling was diagnosed clinically with SDS in 2006 by Dr. Richard Harris at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. All 3 of her children currently have IEPs, and 2 have had 504 plans in the past. Maura has worked as a school psychologist in Northern California for 25 years, serving children ages 2 through 22 as well as their families. Maura's areas of expertise include supporting children and families in making a smooth transition from early intervention to preschool services, supporting students of all ages with autism, ADHD, and other neurodevelopmental disorders, providing educationally related mental health services and educational diagnostics and psychometry. Also, Maura's pretty good at figuring out what's going on with a child and getting them through education with proper evaluations. Maura's always believed her most important role has been an advocate for children with special needs and their families, having spent a great deal of time on both sides of an IEP meeting table. And if anyone's been in an IEP meeting room, you know exactly what that feels like. She's had a lot of practice at it. She looks forward to supporting our precious SDS children and her family and our families. And so we are going to go ahead and bring Maura on now.
Hi, Maura.
Hi, Maura. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
So happy to be here.
We are happy to have you here.
Thank you so much.
So, Maura, we're going to hand the floor over to you to give your presentation shortly. And I wanted everyone to know that after Maura's presentation, we're going to show a presentation from Honey Denson. Honey has spent her entire career in education. She has taught everything from early intervention to public K-12 and is currently a lecturer at Middle Tennessee State University. She's also the mom of 3, soon to be 4 children. Luke, her oldest, had SDS as well as a diagnosis of PDD, NOS, and ADHD. Her second child, Josh, has Down syndrome. And we wanted to have Honey here so bad, but she was just had time constraints that we couldn't work around, and she couldn't work around. So she did send us a presentation, and she's hopeful to jump in on the comments and answer questions after her presentation is over. But for now, we will go ahead and let Maura get her presentation started. So let's get this going.
All right. And can you see my slides?
I sure can.
Oh, good.
You're all set, ready to go.
So, all right, wonderful. Thank you. So back to school is our topic. And today we are going to, as Michelle just mentioned, we're going to be presenting some information to you in 2 parts. The first part, which I'm presenting, is going to cover what supports are available in public schools and how to access supports and services, etc. And then, as Michelle mentioned, the wonderful Honey Denson will be presenting part 2. And again, she's an educator, an advocate, an SDS mom, and she's going to be talking about accommodations, which can be available not just in, early intervention or preschool or grade school, high school, but also college and even in the job force. So I'm going to figure out how this works. There we go. So that's me, and I won't go over any of that because I didn't realize it was all in the bio. So that's me, and I'm a school psychologist and advocate, and I've had a lot of practice on both sides of the table. And it's a real passion of mine, supporting especially other SDS families, because there's a lot that we have to manage. I've been told that there are a lot of families who have young children who are very new to accessing support in the school setting. And for that reason, I'm going to be talking a lot about some of the very basics of what's available and how those supports may be accessed. There'll still be some information for those of you with older children or maybe already in the system and maybe know the ropes a little bit. And I also hope to be available at a later date for families who might need some, guidance or consultation about their specific situation. But we'll talk about that later. I'm working two different screens here, so all right. Today's topics. So I'm going to be covering some of those basics for children and families who aren't yet connected with supports in the schools. And we'll be talking a little bit about the differences between a 504 plan. You may have heard that, Section 504, versus an IEP, or for younger children, it's called an IFSP. And I'll explain what all that means. I'm going to talk about what are the different types of plans that might be indicated and how to figure out what might be right for your child. Then we'll take a look at a case study of an SDS child, one of mine, and what their process was like in the initial stages of working with the schools and how best to do that. And so also how you can go about getting some supports, and finish up with some things you should keep in mind that are important as you continue on in this process. I can't quite see all of my notes, so we're going to move to the next slide. School. So I would imagine most people are pretty excited when their children are old enough to start a formal schooling program. But as parents of children with chronic and acute medical issues, sometimes the idea of our kids actually starting school can be quite daunting, if not kind of terrifying. We've managed to learn the ropes of our child's medical condition. We've learned to advocate medically for our child. And in many cases, we've actually even perhaps had to educate our local doctors about our child's medical situation, based on all that we've learned through this amazing community and through consultation with the wonderful and wonderfully accessible, they've really gone out of their way, the experts in the SDS medical community, as well as learning from moms who've already maybe walked the path and kind of helped us along in the initial stages. And that's quite a lot of learning we've done in the medical area. But school? Well, as my mom used to say, that's a whole other kettle of fish entirely. I just look at that picture of that big school building and think of my little child, and there's a whole different set of systems in place and new team members, and it can be quite difficult to figure out where to even start. So let's see. So we want our precious children to experience all of the delights and joys and learning opportunities which school has to offer them, and to experience those in the same way as every other child. But we wonder how our child's teacher and other educators at school could really ever come to understand all the complexity that is our child. And we wonder, how in the world can we keep them safe? We wonder if the school will work with us in a non-adversarial manner and work with us to make sure that all of our children's needs are met. Sometimes we have particular allergies or health needs, or any of a million different specialized things that apply to our child that doesn't apply to probably anyone else in the school. And so knowing all of that and knowing how serious our child's health condition is or can be as well, it seems really daunting. And because our child is not just like most other kids. And so we wonder, now what? How do we even proceed? What's the best way to go about getting in touch with the school system? And how best can we let them know about our child and what he, she, or they really need? But guess what? There's actually some good news. Because public school systems, if they're receiving money from the federal government, are required to provide students with disabilities a free, appropriate public education. You might have heard the term FAPE. Well, that's what it is. It's something they're obligated to provide to qualifying students, accommodations, supports, and possibly services to help their education free of charge to families. So 2 of the most common support plans that you will see are the 504 plan and an IEP or an IFSP. And those stand for an individualized education plan, which is for generally ages 3 through 22. In some states, it goes from birth to and then, the individualized family support plan, which is the IFSP, and that's for children birth to age 3. And I think in some states it's birth to age 5. It does vary a little bit. So let's take a quick look at these 2 different things. 504 plan. It's derived from Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which is a civil rights law intended to protect individuals with disabilities from discrimination. Section 504 protects qualifying students by providing the students, prohibiting these students from being excluded from public schools or being denied benefit of public schools because of their disability. Students can receive accommodations and sometimes modifications if they meet the eligibility requirements. And the 504 plan outlines how the child's specific needs are to be met. These plans are designed to allow students with disabilities access to the grade level curriculum, as well as prevent discrimination as a result of their disability. They help to level the playing field for students by putting accommodations and sometimes services in place to allow the child that access to FAPE, their free appropriate public education. There we go. A student with a 504 plan usually spends generally the entire day in a general education classroom rather than a separate or a special education classroom. The plan can designate both general accommodations as well as very, very child-specific accommodations, such as providing extended time or small group administration for testing, frequent breaks during instruction. One in particular that we used was no limits on the use of that bathroom. You don't have to ask permission. There's a system to just go. Or modified homework assignments. Those are some of the more general ones. And so who might be eligible for a 504 plan? To be protected under Section 504, a student must be determined to, 1, have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, or 2, have a record of such impairment, or 3, be regarded as having an impairment. It's really kind of a broader definition of who might qualify. But specifically, what do some of these things mean? So we'll take a little closer look at some of those. It just jumped back. Okay, here we are. So who's eligible, and what does this physical or mental impairment mean? Basically, as you can kind of see in the slide, there are a variety of potential impairments and conditions. And really, the key element to qualify for a 504 plan is that whatever the physical or mental impairment is, it must substantially limit one or more major life activities. Okay, well, what's a major life activity? Well, caring for yourself, performing manual tasks. I mean, it really covers a really wide range of things that most of us do every day. So walking, seeing, hearing, speaking, breathing, learning, working, eating, sleeping, it's a very, very long list, and it's not exhaustive what's listed there. The law was further defined, I believe, by Congress to include major bodily functions across a wide range of body systems as major life activities. So that adds in the functions of the immune system, which is really relevant for our children, normal cell growth, digestive, bowel, bladder, neurological, brain, respiratory system, circulatory, endocrine, and reproductive function. So it really is a very, very wide net of if you have some medical or physical mental condition, which affects your ability to do the things that most people are expected to be able to do in life. So it's a very large, number of people who might be supported through a 504 plan. Okay. So let's take a look at the other one, an individualized education plan. This is another federal law called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and it was actually rewritten in, I believe, 2004, and it goes IDEIA. It's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act. And what this is it's a federal law which created and governs special education. It entitles eligible children with disabilities to the specially designed instruction and individualized services and supports that they need in order to benefit from their free, appropriate public education. These plans allow for remediation, related services, and accommodations as needed to provide the student with that FAPE, that free public education. Let's look at our next one. Why does it skip around? So how does an IEP work? Each IEP must be designed for each particular child, and it must take into account the needs related to the child's disability. And as such, it really can become a truly individualized document. That's where there's some comfort, I think, for those of us with, children with, who are considered medically fragile or who have really extreme or unique kinds of needs related to SDS, because I think some critiques of special ed are sometimes that, it's just boilerplate, it's a cookie cutter thing. Not when you've got a really unique situation, and it shouldn't be in the first place, but with our kids, it really does need to be finely tuned to each child so that all of their needs are addressed and they are supported. So in order to create that effective IEP, parents, teachers, and other school staff, and sometimes even the child when they're a little older, they come together at a meeting to look closely at the unique needs of your child. I still can't see this. These individuals will combine their knowledge, their experience, and commitment to design an educational program that must help the child to be involved in and progress in the general education curriculum. So what that is the same, all of the same things kids would be learning in that general education classroom. So the same as what kids without disabilities are learning. The IEP guides the delivery of special education and related services and supplementary aids and supports. And I can talk with you about this in more detail, but we're going to skip the details for now. It guides the delivery of all these different things in order to support your child specifically. And if there's anything I can say about it, it truly requires, oh my God, I think my iPad is making my thing jump around. I apologize, it's on the wrong slide. So it requires teamwork, and it's a blurry picture, but it's a whole bunch of educators, parents, student, administrator, maybe a specialist coming together to talk about specifically what the child needs. All right. Oops, gosh, sorry. So, but not every child who struggles in school does qualify for these services and accommodations. And to determine the eligibility for such services under IDEA, that federal law for special education, a student must first receive a full individual initial evaluation to determine if it's not moving. Sorry. To determine if it's still not moving. I'm having a hard time, sorry, seeing my notes. All right. So determine if they qualify for services, they need to have a full evaluation, comprehensive evaluation, which will help to determine if they might meet eligibility criteria for one of the 13 categories of disabilities that's listed specifically in IDEA. We'll take a look at that. All right. So there's a whole range of categories. I've been asked if my child has eligibility under more than one, is that okay? And it's like, you can definitely have more than one eligibility area. I think, yeah, all three of my kids definitely qualified in more than one area. And all that means is it helps to more clearly show a teacher or a service provider, a little bit more of the depth of what's, complexity perhaps of what's going on for a student. And I've also been asked, well, they initially entered as a student with a speech language impairment, which is, oh my gosh, I would say upwards of 80 or 90% of students who do enter special education often come in starting with a speech language impairment, because it's easily identifiable very young. And then sometimes as children grow older and periodically have reassessments, we can figure out, oh, there's also an issue going on with the learning, or we didn't notice it so much earlier, but they're really struggling with, say, speech and language, or a specific learning disability, or maybe a medical condition has become more, impactful for the child's learning. But in addition to meeting the specific criteria for one of these eligibility categories, because each of these 13 have their own very specific legal law laid out. You also must meet a 3-prong test. Let's take a look at that. So in addition to meeting all the criteria for one of those areas, we also have to say, so first they have to meet that, then they have to, the suspected disability has to affect the student's educational performance. And they also have to, student has to need specialized instruction and related services in order to even benefit from their educational program. So, and all that helps get determined with a comprehensive evaluation, including observations, parent input, actual testing with the student. All right. It wasn't on the screen. Struggling with this one. Okay. So I thought we'd just take a quick look at what these different programs might look like within our national student population. 82.7% are general ed students, only receiving general education curricula and general supports that are offered to anybody at school. 15% might be special education students who might be served in a wide variety of learning environments, including general education, or maybe a more restrictive but more supportive specialized program to help them with their specific learning needs. And the national average is only 2.3% for a 504 plan. I was a little surprised at that, but it actually varies over time, because the one unique thing about a 504 plan is it is something that you can take with you past age 22, or not past 22, but past high school. You can go to college and have accommodations through a 504 plan. Right. Oh boy. So comparing and contrasting the plans. Why is it jumping all around? I think it's my iPad. All right. We're going to skip to it's moving. I'm not doing anything. Okay. So these are where some of the 504 and IEP or IFSP have some areas in common. They're all law-based. They provide for accommodations. They're no cost. And then on the sides are where they separate as plans. So we'll jump ahead to a case study. And start with school, meet my kid. Now, this is a very old document I was able to find, and it just highlights my kid. So it's nice. You can put one of these together for your teacher, for your school, and you can, it actually just calmed a lot of my anxiety just to do it and to go over it with the educators. But you can include, main information about you, and this is great, jumping all around. A little positive note, yeah, Ashleen's ready for first grade. We're all excited a year ahead. Here's some things about her medical situation you might find useful. And I give little quick descriptions of Shwachman-Diamond, neutrophils, pancreatic insufficiency. I list doctors that she's being followed by, her medications she's taking, any allergies, which could be a page in itself for some students. These are symptoms, things that I notice that I think could be misinterpreted. This is an important part. Things that could be misinterpreted as behavioral or attitude, or, Ashleen specifically, when she was little, she had what we call, and a lot of us in the Shwachman community kind of came up with the name, dip days, when her neutrophils would drop low and she'd have those shiners under her eyes. She'd just be miserable and irritable and short-tempered. And so just trying to explain ahead of time, you may see this, and here's what would help, Also, I was concerned about, how are you going to keep this kid ever in school? Because they have this 24-hour rule of, if you have a fever or if you vomit, you can't come back. And it's like, Ashley was running low-grade fevers for months at a time. And same thing with the vomiting. She vomited all the time, and it didn't necessarily have anything to do with like a communicable disease. So we had to work that out through a plan. So let's see. It's not changing pages. Finally, so letting her know about things they might notice in her, and then things they need to notify us if these things happen, such as she's running a higher, running a temperature, has extreme fatigue or irritability, moderate to severe abdominal pain or bone pain, or if there's an outbreak in her classroom of something that could be very dangerous for her. And then finally, if there are any academic, behavioral, emotional concerns, let us know. We want to work with you about that. Okay. So basically, I put together all of that information, gave it to my school, and then I also put together questions and concerns about some of those specific things. And then just to get information, if she's out for a long time, when does home hospital kick in? What does that look like? Who's going to notify us if there's, do they have something on their desk that says something outbreak on the front at the school secretary? Let us know. And here's a picture of a little tent. Ashley in kindergarten and maybe first grade did have a private little area where she could go rest, but we needed to work those things out in order to best serve her. So oh, it's not doing it at all. Sorry. Sorry. So with all that information that I brought to the schools, you think they could put together a plan for support? You bet. Definitely. Ashleen's plan, actually, she began with a 504 plan in kindergarten in the beginning of first grade because she really just required some accommodations like taking medication before meals and, them having an eye out for certain situations and notifying us. It wasn't so much academic to start. And then by the middle of first grade, though, it was pretty clear that she was having a lot of trouble with sound symbol recognition and reading in general. So she's starting to struggle academically, and it appeared as if her medical condition was having that impact on her school performance. Just staying awake sometimes was really hard. So she was evaluated and eventually found eligible for an IEP. So remember those 13 categories under which she might qualify for an IEP. Ashley was first identified under other health impairment. So let's see. Specifically, this is one that I would almost guarantee would be an eligibility category. If you have a child who is struggling academically, they would always have eligibility under other health impairment, provided they do have those educational struggles. And what that other health impairment means is having limited strength, vitality, or alertness. And this includes a heightened alertness to environmental stimuli, like an ADHD situation, that results in limited alertness with respect to the educational environment. So with our kids, that can look like, low neutrophils, they're anemic, they're tired all the time, and that manifests as them falling asleep in class a lot. So that's impacting their ability to take in their education. All of these things have to be related to chronic or acute health problem. And I've got a lot of information in here that I'm probably going to skip ahead with because, they have listed some conditions here. It's not exhaustive. There's hundreds of conditions which could qualify as another health impairment medical condition. But the one thing that makes the difference is whether you're eligible or not, if you have a condition, is it must adversely affect the child's educational performance. So how can I tell what my kid needs? All right. And how do I get the school to help? Blah. So I'm just going to go over some of the steps for success that we kind of went over with the case study. So day one, I provided the teacher and administration information about specific to my kid. I expressed my questions and concerns in writing. I requested a meeting to discuss those questions and concerns in writing. Schools need to have a written, I think not even an email. It has to be a written. It can be very simple, but requesting that we have a meeting to discuss your child's disability or their progress in school. And then I brought in questions that I had about how she might need supports, but also I brought in a variety of possible solutions because this is new to them. You think school's new to you. Well, your child's complex medical condition is completely new to them. So I problem solve some things ahead of time, what sanitation can look like or rest area, things like that. And then I showed the team that I was really ready to collaborate with them. I had a positive attitude. I wanted them to see that like we were excited for my daughter's inclusion in school and it was workable. And that just takes the stress for a teacher down a lot, or an administrator, to know that, this is a parent's going to work with us and they're clearly involved in their child's education. So final thoughts and resources. I want to just click to the next. Healthy children learn better and school nurses make it happen. So true. There's a variety of specialists that can help your child, that might be part of their plan, that can support them at school, regardless of what the plan is. School nurses are in particular going to be one of the most important people on your team. I've worked with so many school nurses and they're really, really amazing people. And again, just like you collaborate with your teacher and your administrators, you're going to really want to get to know this person. And oftentimes, whether it's a 504 or an IEP, a school nurse will or should put together what's called a health plan, which is it's kind of like a document that says, what are our goals and objectives? What are things we need to address and how we're going to go about doing that, and who's going to be responsible for it. And it's a super helpful document. And one more thing about school nurses. This is just more about the law, but here are things that sometimes it can be a designated like a support health tech, but sometimes you need a true nurse to support your child for part of their day, or if they have catheterization or trach management, special feedings, tube feedings. Some things can be trained to a paraprofessional and some things need that school nurse, but the school nurse is the person who's going to really help you figure out what that should look like. So they are friends. So I have all sorts of links. I have sample letters for how to write to a school. I have websites that are particularly helpful that share the law and the like parent support documents, and receive your free IEP binder to organize your paperwork. So, oops, I didn't change it. Don't type your email address in the chat because this is public, but I'm going to comment when this gets posted, and I will probably list all of those resources for you there so that you can explore and look for supports yourself. And then finally, thank you for your time and attention. And I really look forward to perhaps having some time where we can support you all with like more specific issues and questions. So I'm happy to do that. All right. Thank you.
That was great.
That was a fantastic.
Thank you, Maura. Yeah, that was really great.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to do it.
We had one question come in, and I think we can ask it before we go ahead to Honey's presentation.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
If SDS is not affecting their academic performance, would they still be protected with a medical plan? Would the public school be obligated to follow a medical plan?
Read that one more time. Let's see. Oh, I can see
No
it right here.
worries.
I was turning off my other screen. Would they still be protected? Yes. Medical plan can definitely be part of a 504, Section 504 plan. And they definitely are obligated to follow the plan. And, you know, the effects that can come with SDS, I mean, there's Dr. Kerr's wonderful study, there's all sorts of information now, but sometimes there can be effects that we don't even think of as effects. So that might be something, I mean, I think it's phenomenal if kids don't need academic support, that's great. But I would keep an open mind that perhaps there are ways that might be impacting them that aren't just reading or math. So
what also may be helpful is like letting them know the breadth of what SDS can cover, because as they age, new things might pop up, like,
absolutely,
they may not be struggling with one thing, but it's at least on their radar. So they're watching for it, so, right. More, though, I think that would be a good idea.
Particularly around, excuse me, particularly around transplant.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was mentioned in the last neurodiversity, the last presentation.
Yeah, the last presentation with Quentin and Koo.
That, you really want a solid baseline of testing because chemotherapy and some of the really intense drugs can have an effect on neurological functioning. So you kind of really would want to have some more closer look in that.
And time. You just, I mean, especially with young kids, you just don't know, like sometimes they're not always able to share, like, I feel tired, or you just don't always know they don't know how to express themselves if they're feeling something. So the teacher is aware of what to look for, that you could have that open dialogue.
Absolutely.
Just on a side note, I started baby sign with Ashleen, and she had so much going on and couldn't express it verbally, but she's like, I've got an owie, she had a sign for it, and then she'd point, and it kind of gave me a clue of something going on. But that can be worked out with a teacher. Teachers, they so want to support our kids, but we don't want them to feel like they don't know how. So anything we can do to say, this is what works at home. This is how this is how she tells me that she has to go to the bathroom, or this is whatever the case may be.
Michelle, can we throw up Lisa Sabrina's sister's comment real quick? Because that's a really good point.
Absolutely.
I just want to shout out to Lisa Sabrina's sister, that I think it's amazing that she watches all these shows to help support her nieces. So she brought up a point of that, COVID's still going on and the schools are cleaning a lot, which is true. I could speak to, I have a about to be second grader. I'm in Texas, and those protocols are starting to get rewound. So try to make sure that all that is in your plan, because when that's unwound, it's a lot easier for it to be in the plan. Because when Roman entered kindergarten, it was like COVID had just started. So, and I kept saying, but I want these things in his plan, so when they go away, they know to add them. So I'm happy that New York is being really careful, but just make sure that what you need on a non-COVID year is in there. And it's awesome if they're still doing stuff like that, because that is very helpful for all the kids.
Absolutely. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and play Honey's presentation for us now.
Sure.
And then we will all be back to answer questions.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Especially from a teacher's perspective, what can help you? As I mentioned, my name is Honey Denson, and I am in education. I've been in education pretty much my whole career. I've done everything through birth through 3, all the way through college. I currently teach at Middle Tennessee State University, and so I'm just kind of going to go over especially from a teacher's perspective, what can help you get accommodations in the classroom from those early preschool years all the way through when your child is in the college setting. All right, so starting young, that's going to be the most important thing. Many of our SDS children present with delays early on, a lot of them with language delays, a lot of fine motor, gross motor, whatnot. If you feel as though your child is not meeting milestones, you can ask your pediatrician for a referral to your state's early intervention program. And honestly, they might kind of pick up on it themselves, especially if you feel like your child has low tone or whatnot. And here's the thing, like, even if you feel like they're under the age of 1 and they're not really meeting their milestones, but they don't quite qualify for early intervention yet, you can ask again. My own son, Luke, I don't think he really qualified for early intervention until he was about 2.5, when his language delays kind of got to the point where we were able to get him services. So even if you don't get them right away, you can always request that they're tested again. So, and if they qualify, and qualifications can vary from state to state, they will receive what is known as an Individualized Family Service Plan, or an IFSP. And this will enable them to receive therapy services for free through the state. They might also have, like my son with Down syndrome was able to attend a program at Middle Tennessee State University that was kind of like a preschool. It was a baby's class, and it was really, really helpful for him. But when you have an IFSP, it really helps make it easier to obtain an individualized education plan, or IEP, and accommodations once they start school. So let's get to the school setting. So tips from a teacher, because as I said, teacher at heart, taught K-12 as well. Tips, these are just, teachers are learners and researchers at heart. And so, but the thing of it is, there are hundreds of medical conditions and learning disabilities that we could possibly encounter, and we don't know about all of them. And even the ones we do know a lot about have a spectrum of symptoms, and we see this in the SDS community is, some kids suffer from neutropenia their whole lives and are Neupogen dependent. Like my Luke only had about a neutropenia when he was a baby and actually had normal neutrophil counts up until the point where he developed myelodysplastic syndrome. So some kids need enzymes, some don't. So every disease, every learning disability that you encounter has a spectrum. And so you can't expect a classroom teacher to know exactly what's going on with your child, because I can say, oh, my son has autism. Well, that can mean a wide range of things. It can mean everything from that they're completely nonverbal, not potty trained at 8, whatever, to being extremely high functioning and can tell you everything there is to know about Apple computers. So it's really important that you have good communication with your teacher. Let your educators know from the start of the school what your child has and how it impacts their learning, and also how it impacts their ability to function in a classroom environment. Even if you don't qualify for an IEP or 504, when you have that good communication, it can help your teacher know, hey, they might not have an IEP or 504, but if I make this accommodation, it's going to make my life easier. I had a lot of students that did not have IEPs or 504s, but I worked in a school where there was a lot of abuse. I hate to say that, it's really horrible. It really was. And so like some of these kids that had been put in state custody, they didn't have any formalized education plans, but yet the school, we would sit down with their guardians and come out with a plan and go, hey, this is what's going to make sure that you have a smooth school year. And I was more than happy to make those accommodations because 1, it was best for the child, and 2, it was best for me to make sure that I had a well-oiled machine in my classroom with this student. So I say give, create, be, and share. So give your teacher at the beginning of the year an overview of SDS. You can print out some information, find a brochure, a booklet. SDSF has a lot of resources on this. And so I found it really, really helpful at the beginning of the year if I handed my kids' teachers a little book and said, this is Swatman-Diamond syndrome. And they're like, oh, this is really, really helpful for me to understand what's going on with your child. Create an About Me book or worksheet, and I'm going to go over that in just a minute. But it shows who your child is, how SDS impacts their life, if they have a secondary diagnosis of ADHD, OCD, ODD, autism, whatever. you can include that right there. And they're really great for IEP meetings or just in general for your teacher to have to know what kind of accommodations they might need. Be available to answer any questions. That's extremely important. I was always an open book with my teachers, and they really, really appreciated that. And I really, as a teacher, appreciated it if I could call a parent and go, hey, I've been trying this. Is that your recommendation? It's not working. What else do you suggest? And that was always just extremely helpful when I had parents that were just more than willing to let me know and work with me to help their child succeed. Share what works for you at home. That's extremely important because sometimes what does work at home can help transition to the classroom very easily. So this is just a template of what an All About Me book is. That is a link, and I'll try to see if I can get that in the comments or something. So that way, if you do want to print this off as a printable worksheet, I just kind of like this one because it kind of encompasses everything. But when you're in these IEP meetings, and as a general ed teacher, I don't know how many times I actually got called into an IEP meeting for a student that wasn't mine. So in the IEP world, they just need a general education teacher to sign off on the IEP. And especially in elementary school, they really try to ensure that that's your child's specific teacher. But when they get into middle school and high school, just because of the timing and how many students they have, they just grab someone. I had first period plan, and my room was the closest room to the guidance office in the whole school. Every morning at 8 o'clock, it seemed like I was getting a call from guidance saying, hey, Ms. Denson, we got another IEP meeting. Do you mind coming down here so you can sign off on it? I'm like, I don't know this kid. I will never have this kid. But yet I was in the IEP meeting, and you will encounter that. And so when parents had something like this, oh my goodness, it was so helpful. Or like if your student's new to a school, if they've transitioned into middle school, high school, or you've switched elementary schools, something like this just lets the people on the IEP team know, hey, this is my kid. You can put their picture in there. What do they love? What are their strengths? And it's really, really important to emphasize what they do well. What works for me, how best to support me, what doesn't work for me, and what am I working on, and so on and so on. And so just having that sheet can go a really long way in opening up that dialogue to ensure that you're getting those accommodations that you feel like your child needs to be successful in the classroom. So these are some common accommodations that we see, especially for SDS kids. My son had a dual diagnosis of PDD and OS, which is on the autism spectrum, and ADHD. So as he moved on into elementary school, we realized he needed more time zone tests. He needed to test in a smaller environment. He needed a cool down space. So we had it written as IEP. If he gets overwhelmed, he had a spot in the school that he could go to just to cool down for 20 minutes, and then he could go back and work. And it worked out great for him. As an SDS child, you can ask for more excused absences. I remember one time they forgot. Luke had missed a lot of school because he had contracted strep throat, and it had attacked his kidneys. It had a really long scientific name that I can't remember. He missed a ton of school that year, and actually got a truancy letter, and I had to call him and say, hey, according to his IEP, he can miss more than 10 days. And so you can add stuff like that in there. I also had it in there that they had to inform me if there was illness going around the school. You know, hey, is there a flu outbreak? Is there a strep throat outbreak? Do you mind just calling me? You know, they don't have to name kids. You know, that's a violation all in of itself. But if there's like 2 or 3 cases of strep, or if Luke was sitting close to someone who recently got diagnosed with an illness, could you just kind of give me a heads up? And that was really, really helpful. And they did do that. Modified assignments. They can definitely modify assignments for your student if they need to. If the accommodations are listed in an IEP or 504, they must be followed. If they are not, you are an equal member of the IEP or 504 team, and you can call a meeting. Another thing to make note of is that I find that it's really, really important that as your children get into middle school, high school, that they become members of the IEP team. And that becomes really, really important as they go to college. So that way they learn how to speak up for themselves. Because once they get into college, got a little ahead of myself there, sorry. They can receive accommodations in the classroom on the collegiate level. But the thing of it is, if they haven't started young, then they might not know what to ask for. So just a quick side story. My son Joshua is actually named after a friend of ours who has some severe learning disabilities. And this is just a great example of this. In his IEP, he had it that he needed to sit in the front of the classroom because he was easily distracted. He had some ADHD-like symptoms. And a teacher put him in the back. And he came home and he told his mom, he's like, Mom, they have me sitting in the back of the classroom and I'm struggling. And she said, you need to go tell your teacher that he's not following your IEP. Because as a classroom teacher, we have 100 students a day. And sometimes, I mean, we're just human. We forget. And so he went to school the next day, asked the teacher, said, hey, you remember my IEP? I need to sit up front. And they're like, oh my gosh, yes. And so they set him up front and it was perfectly fine for the rest of the school year. That also empowered him when he went off to college, and he had to be the one to get the accommodations. So most universities have an office for disabilities. Before classes start, you can do it after, but before classes start, your adult child will have to be the one to contact them to set up those accommodations. Mama and daddy can't do it. There is a law called FERPA, and I can't talk to my students' parents on the collegiate level, because that's a federal law violation. I could get in huge trouble if I divulge, and I can't even acknowledge to the parent that I have the child in my classroom. Not a child, they're actually an adult. But so that's why you need to start empowering them young, so that way they can get those accommodations in college. So the office, once they fill out the forms and get the accommodations laid out, there's a person that they will work with. It might be helpful if you bring a copy, send them with a copy of their last IEP. And that would be really, really helpful for the people in the office, just to kind of know, hey, this is what I need to do to get these accommodations. They will email the instructor. I get an email at the beginning of the semester and I have to check off saying, hey, I checked and these are the accommodations the student needs. But I also have found that my students, a lot of them will reach out to me first. Like they'll email me before the semester begins and go, hey, I'm so-and-so. You're about to get a list, an email from the Office for Disabilities. These are the accommodations that I need. I'm just giving you a heads up. And that is so helpful for me when it comes to planning, because it lets me know right off the bat, because sometimes the Office for Disabilities, they try their best, but sometimes I don't really get the email until right about the time classes start, or maybe even the week classes start, depending on if we have a late enrollment. And it lets me know, hey, these first few assignments, I might need to modify it a little bit. Or, I have it where due dates in our online system, but if a student in their accommodations has it listed that they're allowed 3 extra days, I can go in there and individually change that student's due date and whatnot. And so it's just helpful for me as an instructor if those students are empowered and feel comfortable enough to contact me early, so that way I can start those accommodations. I did have a student though, halfway through the semester, she for some reason didn't want to go to the Office for Disabilities, and she said halfway, she was like, Ms. Denson, I have ADHD and I'm struggling. I'm like, oh my goodness, there's nothing to be ashamed of when it comes to that. What do you need? Here, go to the Office for Disabilities, but tell me what you need now so we can work on this moving forward. And so, those accommodations are there for them, and they should take advantage of them. So, the accommodations can be very similar to the K-12. They can do more time on assignments, modified assignments, no attendance penalties, and that's going to be really big as we're coming out of COVID and colleges are starting to reenact attendance policies, and even alternate evaluations. And just so you know, just a little side note, the Americans for Disabilities Act offers protection in the workplace. So as your college or high school student starts working, they can get accommodations at work. They have to be able to perform the job. You have to provide proof of disability, and the accommodations can be negotiated, but that is something that they can get. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. I may or may not be on this call. I don't know. I'm pre-recording this, but Nicole and Michelle, feel free to give them my contact info. I would be happy to talk to any of you. Michelle, feel free to give them my contact info. I would be happy to talk to any of you.
And she's here.
Surprise, we do have Honey here.
Surprise. Do we still have Maura?
Yes, I'm sorry. Maura there was a little delay. There we all are. We all made it on. Look at all of us. Surprise, everyone's here.
She came in clutch. Great job, ladies.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Okay, I know we're going a little over, so we'll try to speed
So
it up.
sorry.
We had a really good question. Can we throw up the question?
Yep.
No. Yep,
There it is.
yep,
And I don't think all of it's going to fit on screen, so I'll read the
Yeah.
best that I can. My
Okay.
son will be in 5th grade this upcoming school year. I'm very anxious as he is struggling academically. He does have an IEP plan, but still a little struggle. I would like to know when he is ready to go for middle school, will his IEP be transferred, or will we have to go all over again and apply for a new IEP plan at his new school?
Great question.
Yeah, they shouldn't have to. I mean, usually when you have an IEP, at least in the state of Tennessee, you're reevaluated every 3 years. So you do go through a reevaluation process. And if he's not up for a reevaluation, then it should transition smoothly from his current elementary school to his middle school. And even like we have a weird situation in our county where we have city schools. And so when you transition to the high school, you're actually in a completely different school system.
Wow.
And we had no problem transitioning IEPs for that.
I've heard, oh, sorry.
And
What were we going to say?
no,
Yeah.
I was just going to add on to
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yep.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I typed a response to that one as we were joining back in, but
Oh yeah,
so
moving.
figured
Yeah,
out how to
moving
chat.
to out of town or a new district. Yeah.
Yeah, if you move across town, across the country, even all you need to do is bring a copy of that either 504 plan or IEP document to your new school and just say, my child, has an IEP and I want you to know we're joining your district, and you don't have to start all over again. They do their best to recreate what program was created in their setting, and that's negotiable. You work with them over a period of time to make sure everything's in place correctly.
And we're a unique case here is that my daughter was in public school before we started homeschooling. In public school, my daughter had an active 504 plan to prevent truancy. She had an allowance on assignments and other various things. When we left the public school system and homeschooled, we then joined a homeschool partnership that was actually part of a school district, and her IEP, or I'm sorry, her 504 carried over, and I had no idea that it would. And so we keep up on it every 3 years, even if we're not actively using it, just to keep it active and in the
That's
system,
smart.
that it's the same thing. We're very blessed that the homeschool partnership we go to does not go for truancy or anything like that. We've not needed to make one for Nathan yet, but we've kept Evelyn's active because I know how much of a fight that was to get it.
And
one question I wanted to ask, and I know Nicole has a couple too, but can you guys speak a little bit on the role of advocates in the place of getting IEPs, 504s?
Good question.
I think they can go both ways. I think it can be a very positive thing. I know myself, it doesn't matter how many thousands of IEPs I've sat in. When it's my kid, I get anxious. I can't think straight. I can't remember. I have to write things down. It's so nice to have someone who you can, did you hear this? Or, just kind of have another set of ears there that isn't as closely involved emotionally. But I've also seen quote unquote professional advocates who really don't understand their actual job because they make it adversarial, and it kind of it makes everybody a little, I think some people think, well, that'll keep the educators on their toes, and that's true, but it doesn't feel good. Everyone's coming to the table trying to do what's right. If that's the case, you don't need a bulldog. You just need someone who can help.
You could ask another SDS parent from another state. It doesn't have to be an actual advocate that you pay or something like that.
Yeah. I'm willing to do that.
Really
I'm willing to do that.
Yeah, I'm not an official advocate, but I've been asked by some of my fellow special needs parents, hey, do you mind coming to the IEP meeting with me, just because I feel like something's not right. You have that background in education. I just need someone to help me.
Right.
And
that could be done virtually, because I know we're all over the place.
It can 100% be done virtually now.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting too, a lot of places do provide free advocates. Like, I don't know if you have an ARC in your area. a lot of them will provide like free advocates for things like IEPs, like people who have been trained in this stuff. But, I would recommend don't let the first time you meet the advocate be at the IEP meeting, because
Yeah.
you don't know,
Yeah.
you don't want someone coming barreling in going, okay, because they don't really know your kid either.
Especially with SDS, right? Because
Yeah.
they try to put them in a box that they sometimes put them in a box that they're familiar with, and SDS
Yeah.
has a whole
Well, I mean,
different
like, there's a lot
explanation.
because my son has Down syndrome. I have one with
Mhm.
Down syndrome, and Down syndrome is such a range of ability, and it's like you can't put them, or autism, like anything, you can't put it in a box. And
Right.
so yeah, I've seen advocates go both ways, where they've been really helpful, but then they've also been really harmful. And I think that the situations where they're really helpful is when the parents actually kind of work to develop a relationship with the advocate before they go to the IEP meeting, and
Yeah.
are
Right.
on the same page before they go.
Yeah.
We see behavioral therapy once a week for like family therapy, and she offers her services as being an advocate because she does know our children. She
Nice.
sees them for 2 hours every week. She can see what their strengths are, their struggles are. She doesn't necessarily have to go in like a bulldog just so I can be heard better in maybe a more clear way, because like you said, Maura, when you go into your own IEP meeting, you're a ball of nerves. Sometimes you're like sweating and forgetting words, where she's seen my kids in a neutral setting, and
Yeah.
she can just speak for me, and she knows what I want to say. So I do recommend, if you do get an advocate, start local, start with behavioral therapy, start with a therapist you've seen. We've even had an OT offered be our advocate because she's seen my children's needs.
I don't know if this is normal at all, but I've had several of Roman's doctors on multiple IEP meetings, because they're the ones that are giving,
Nice.
the parameters, and they'll stay on for, over an hour answering questions, because the school, is wanting the information, and just on paper, sometimes it's not always clear. So they could have that back and forth conversation. So I'm very thankful that almost all our doctors, I can't think of one doctor that I've asked that hasn't been on it.
Yeah,
So it's really helpful.
You can bring whoever to the IEP meeting. We actually had a lawyer that was in the county next to us. They brought a court reporter to record the meeting.
Yeah.
It was, but
You might need permission to do that.
Yeah, well,
usually they require 24
Yeah.
hours notice for recording.
yeah, but
I wanted to mention both you ladies threw up really amazing, like, get to know me forums and stuff. So Michelle and I, while we're watching it, we're like, we can make that even more custom for SDS. So we're going to work with you guys on making it more custom and clickable for our website. So hopefully we can get that done in the next week. So you guys, so don't try to, you could use the links that they sent if you need it done right away, but Michelle and I are going to try to get that done in the next week or so for you guys. Also, Honey had mentioned college, and our last show was neuropsych, and they had talked about they're doing that big study, and it's going to encompass a lot of adults college age that previously have not been studied very much. It's been a lot of kids. So we're going to ask them, like we said on the last show, to come on and show those results when they're published. But we would love to have a piggyback after that show if we have a lot of questions from it on like college and work and stuff, because Honey had touched on that. So that was a really good point. It's not always just school age, through 12th grade. I had a question about, I know the answer, but wanted to ask because it was very confusing to me, like literally until last month. If you're homeschooling, Michelle just brought up homeschooling and keeping up with that, or going to private, does any of this apply?
Not specifically what both are based on 504 and IEP or IFSP are based on agencies or schools that receive public funding.
Right.
So private schools, there is something called what's it called? IPT, an individualized there is something. I have to look that up.
Private schools are partially funded, right? So that they would have something similar, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
also like
Some
charter
are.
schools.
Yeah, charter schools. Yeah.
Some charter schools are dependent charters, and they work with under the umbrella of a school district or a local
Right.
education agency, and then some charters are completely on their own, so they're more private. But there is basically a plan that is different from an IEP because you're not in that school system,
Right.
but it functions the same as far as laying out what the student needs are. And I don't believe the school, this will vary by state, I believe,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
even in my county, I've had students at a private school where we did an evaluation. The parent has the option to bring their child to public school to receive the supports and services that are recommended if they're eligible. But at some, like, really, really well off kinds of schools, they have their own support systems within the school. So we can make recommendations and then they work with the family to provide those supports. At the same time, I've also had a situation where it only made sense to provide for this child, a young child who was in a private preschool or, community preschool. And there's a lot more, at least in California, there's a lot more integration of public and private for preschool. But sometimes it just makes sense to support a kid because it's the right thing to do, number one. But providing some OT or physical therapy or whatever the case may be, is wise for the school to do, even though they're not technically required to. But that will vary greatly depending on.
And homeschool, like a homeschool co-op, that would not be. Am I correct? That wouldn't have any.
Not in my experience. I mean, anybody with either homeschool or you have the opportunity
Like a
to
co-op.
Go to your school district and say, here's my situation with my child. They still have child find responsibilities, which means they would need to do an evaluation. Again, they can offer, sometimes I've seen like for private community preschools or a co-op like for homeschooling, part of that homeschool program might be bringing your child into the public schools for some specialized services. Some districts will say, no way, we get your ADA, your average daily attendance, and we get money for that, or we don't serve you. But oftentimes, people want to do what's right. And if you bring your child to the therapist and they're already serving a classroom of kids, your child can benefit from that therapy at times. You have to really work with your district to do things like that, though.
I do know that our 504 was able to be carried over because 504 is different from IEP in the sense that 504, I was just reading online, is available to anyone irregardless of school preference, school where you go. It's a right that you're allowed to have as a 504. An IEP is where it comes in, where a school. So if I wanted to get my children an IEP, even though we do homeschool, I could get Nathan an IEP. I would just have to, in the state of Michigan, every state is different. Every state will be different. Michigan is very easy to homeschool. And I will say, all I have to do is register as a public homeschool to get him an IEP through our public school funded partnership. A partnership between a public school and a co-op are two very different things in the homeschooling world. The co-op is typically run by, there's probably some teachers, but usually moms teaching classes to other kids and other moms teaching things. And a co-op in the sense of that everyone works to make it work together. A partnership, however, is through our public school system where there's public school teachers. They have to have teaching degrees. And so in order, our 504 can transfer there, but our IEP, we need to be registered as a public homeschool to receive services in our district. We're still able to receive the same OT, speech, PT, anything like that, but we have to be registered first. Again, this goes state by state, very different for each state. I would just check in with your laws, check in with your people. The best way I can recommend is calling your local elementary school and asking for their it's called something. It wasn't the school psychologist. It was
Diagnostician?
There's a word and I can't think of it. Like your social rights advocate, education specialist. Exactly. And so they'll know exactly what you need to do and how to do it. and how to get the best for your children.
Yeah.
In some places there's the district level and then there's the county level. So like a county office of education, they're kind of responsible for all of the districts doing the right thing. So they're also a good place to go to get more information about what works in your area. And a huge thing is parent resource center. You could even like here locally we have Matrix, which is a parent resource center. There's other ones. I have a link for where you can look up like how to get in touch with your own, but you could probably just Google parent resource center special education, or schools and disabilities, something like that, and find out. And they do trainings, they do support groups, lots of resources, plus they tend to know what's going on.
Ladies, what would you suggest as first steps if the IEP or 504 is not being followed?
Can I just make one comment on the private school thing?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Because private schools, especially if they aren't getting funding or whatnot, they can reject your child and say, as far as like being a student.
Right.
So, because
private school is attractive to a lot of SDS families because it could be smaller, right? Like there's, I could see how it could be attractive.
Yeah, Luke got rejected from a private preschool, but it was honestly, and I could see why, because they already had a high needs child in the classroom that he was going to be in, and the teachers just weren't trained to deal. I mean, it wouldn't have been a good situation for him, and they were just honest about it. But then we also looked into private school for our kids at one point in time, and they were, excuse me, they were willing to work with Luke, but they were not willing to work with Josh. And so, it's just kind of the deal. So so sometimes parents think, oh, I can just go private school, and you really have to talk to the private school to see if they can handle what.
Our doctors really were pushing private, and it was last month that it was like, what is the stick if they're not publicly funded? And they were like, oh, well, there's not, but it could be smaller. You might have a really good relation, and I was like, well, I think public is for us was a better option.
But so back to your question about what if they're not following the IEP and whatnot.
Yeah, what should be the first steps? Because we're all very exhausted. It's easy to be like, I'm taking my kid out.
No, actually, for me, and I know Maura, you might have a different answer, but for me, I would call an IEP meeting, because as a parent, you can call one and say, hey, no, we're having a meeting about this, because I know you can't just change the plan.
Yeah.
Or just say, hey, I'm not going to follow this part of the IEP anymore. It's like, no, you can't do that. So I would 100% say, okay, well, we're calling an IEP meeting. I am calling one. And I think it's 30 days they have to.
I think most states are 30 days. I've seen 45 out there, but so there is that lag. I was kind of Pollyanna-ish. I always thought if I just communicate with the teacher, and when I probably should have just started the process of, the timeline and you have to request the meeting in writing. But in the meantime, for those 30 days, you've probably already been talking with the teacher and or the specialist, I actually found a time when Ashleen was supposed to be receiving resource 3 times a week, I think, in the morning, and the teacher didn't even know who she was. I'm like, whoa. So things can happen, but start also talking with the people who provide the services. They may be frustrated too, and it might be just we need to all come together and brainstorm some more ideas.
So if the IEP isn't successful, would you suggest then going to the Office of Civil Rights, or bringing in an advocate, or?
No, I it's an individualized situation. I mean, some situations really, going to the Office of Civil Rights is when
like the last step, right?
There's kind of been a gross discrimination happening where your child's denied participation in an activity because, and it's punitive feeling, or just a gross violation of what they're supposed to be doing. But it is an option. And also, Office of Civil Rights is more about discrimination, and 504 whereas a due process is more related to the IEP
Okay.
when there's something that they've not procedurally done and it's impacting your child.
And who do you ask
Um,
that from? Who do you ask that?
You
Is that to the
contact
school?
me.
Okay, okay. It'll help. Okay.
It's
I don't
a
want to go too
big,
far down that road, but this could
yeah,
happen to
no.
families. Yeah.
But
Okay.
really, you want to and probably can solve most problems
Just with an
within
IEP. Yeah.
your team of specialists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just like to get the ball because, it can take 30 days for an IEP meeting to happen. And so Maura is completely right. Talk to the people who are in charge of stuff. Because but I just like to get the ball rolling. I haven't had to do that yet.
Yeah.
But, just saying, okay, well, I'm going to talk to you, but let's go ahead and get the ball rolling to get a meeting set up just in case,
Totally.
you can't get it resolved quickly.
Yeah.
So that way, you do have the meeting that will come up that will help. I was just wanted to clarify that. But yeah, communication is 100% the key as far as like just trying to make sure your kids are getting the services that they need.
Okay. Thank you.
And it's never too soon to start a paper trail.
Mhm.
And, I always tried not to make it feel adversarial or anything, but following an IEP, I mean, I can't really remember a time when IEP notes actually reflected what I believe happened in the meeting.
Mhm.
So, I always follow, well, I don't always, but you can always follow up communications like with the teacher after school, a little email. Hey, thank you so much for like thanking them for their time, your gratitude. Thank you so much. It was really wonderful to speak with you about Ashleen's need for X, Y, and Z. And I look forward to meeting with you, soon. I look forward to hearing a date that you'll meet with me informally soon. Or I understand you're going to be implementing these supports, by the end of the week, or whatever the case may be. Email keeps a track of it, and you don't ever want to have that trail, but when you do, if it's not formally written, it didn't happen.
It didn't
So
happen. Yeah. Ladies, thank you. So we're very over on our time, but this was a very good show and a needed show. We hope you feel more prepared for your school season. This is school year coming up. We linked a bunch of other shows that may also be helpful for you. We are so lucky to have both of you within our community. They're so knowledgeable and know both sides of the table. Thank you to Michelle, who ran behind the scenes tech and co-hosted with me today. We also have upcoming shows, SDS 101, that's going to be run by the registry. We'll also have a Hematology 101 with Dr. Blanche Alter and GI issues coming up. So be watching for those shows advertised. So hope that you feel more prepared for school, be watching for our upcoming shows. And if you have any questions, let us know. We'll get them to the ladies. And again, we're going to be making a more custom form for you guys. So everyone got really excited when you guys were putting up those get to know me forms. So thank you, ladies. Have a great night. Thank you so much for your time.
Bye.
Thank you.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.